I am honored to present on behalf of Ralph Reed and the Faith and Freedom Coalition this Friend of Freedom Award to Senator Rob Portman for his outstanding work in the 112th Congress.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Ken, thanks very much. I will proudly display this in my office, and it will remind me of this day and of the good work you're doing all around the country, including in my state of Ohio, where, as Ralph Reed and I talked about this afternoon, this coalition is making a big difference and has the potential to change the direction of our country. So thank you for that. And Ken, thanks for those very kind words. Ken and I go way back further than either of us would want to admit. As he indicated, he also married over his head. Rose is an amazing woman in her own right, a real leader, and has been a dear friend over the years, and has, a couple titles of his own. Ambassador, statewide elected official, and since leaving electoral politics, as you probably know, he has quietly but effectively played a key role in the state of Ohio and actually around the country, using his deep ties in the faith community and elsewhere to help conservative causes and conservative candidates. I'm one of the beneficiaries of that. And I know what he's been doing, and I appreciate it. He's also less quietly been expressing himself publicly. His views are conservative, consistent, and courageous. And Ken, I thank you for all you do. And Ralph Reed's now joined us, I see. He's enjoying some of the lunch here today. I understand Ken blessed the food earlier, so you can go ahead and eat, even though you weren't here. But Ralph's a dear friend. I appreciate him asking me to come today, and his friendship over the years, his advice, his counsel. He's a smart political guy, and also for the incredible work this group has done under his leadership. It's amazing when you think about it. Shortly after a little election in 2008, when things didn't go our way, Ralph turned to some of you and said, we need to do something different. And, never again shall we have this situation where we're not prepared and we aren't organized. And again, my sense is in the state of Ohio and around the country, you're already making a difference. And we're all going to work very hard, I know, over the next several months to ensure that that difference translates into some electoral victories to begin to turn this country around. Ken mentioned some of the titles I've had, a couple White Houses, a congressman for 12 years, and also now representing the whole state in the United States Senate. It's an honor to do it. A lot of titles. The honest truth is I can't hold a job. But for me, and Ken indicated this, the titles that are much more important to me are husband and father. And those are the ones that I truly cherish. And frankly, as some of you know, public service makes it hard sometimes. It's a challenge. It's tough on your family. I believe it's a noble profession when it's practiced with humility, but it does put a strain on family. You have to believe you're making a difference for your family, for other people's families. You also, though, have to find your balance because you're only as strong as your core, right? And for me, my core is faith and family. If those don't work, nothing else does. One of my favorite passages in the New Testament comes from the book of James, which says, "Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of any kind, because for comfort and for guidance, what do we find? We find that our faith is deepened. That's certainly what I've found. Ken mentioned my work in the first Bush White House. I faced a test there. It was interesting. I was 35 years old. I was director of the White House Office of Legislative Affairs, a job I probably didn't deserve and never expected to have. And one day, someone came to me and said, one of the 10 assistants to the president is leaving, and they'd like you to take the job at age 35 to be one of 10 assistants to a guy I respected more than anyone in politics, George H.W. Bush, for his decency and his honor. At the same time, I was given that opportunity. I found out my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I remember it like it was yesterday, walking into Chief of Staff John Sununu's big office in the corner of the West Wing. Some of you have been there, that office. And he gave me the job offer. Said, I want you to, work for the president in this big job. And I said, I appreciate it, Governor, but I'm going home. It's time for me to go home. He said, what do you mean? Those of you who know John Sununu, he can be a little cranky. And it's like that Bose speaker ad where the guy's sitting in front of the speaker and his hair is going straight back. I got a tirade of, why I needed to do this for my country and for my president. What was this all about? Why was I going home anyway? Well, I kind of mumbled some things about needing to go back to my private sector life, my law firm. And then I said, Governor, my mom's been diagnosed with cancer. He came out from behind his big desk, trusty John Sununu. His eyes were tearing up a little bit. He gave me a big bear hug. And he said, you need to go home. You need to go home. And he was right. It was the best decision I ever made. My mom was dying of cancer, but she lived for 2.5 more years. And those were glorious years, because I got to spend more time with her. And before we lost her, she also got to give the invocation at my swearing in as a new member of Congress. In her time of trial, her faith deepened. She started meeting with a prayer group regularly, and my faith deepened. And I think my whole family's faith deepened. She knew she was going to her eternal home. There was no question in her mind. And for 16 years, until he passed away about 1.5 years ago, my father, every day, couldn't wait for the opportunity to join my mom in heaven. Like them, my faith sustains me. Like them, I pray every day. And sometimes I pray for guidance on Capitol Hill. That's needed. Sometimes I'm not sure exactly what the message I'm getting, but I try. But I've got lots of room to grow in my faith journey. I know that. Have you ever been to church and you feel like the pastor is talking directly to you? That happened to me on Sunday. Our pastor stood up and he gave a great sermon, and as part of it was he actually took from the 23rd Psalm, first time I heard it preached this way, which was basically, in this stressful modern day life we live in, don't try to do it all yourself. Rely on God. He will help you to lie down in green pastures. He will help you to find peace. And it kind of struck a chord with me. As Ken said, in the second Bush White House, I had 2 high-pressure jobs. Trade ambassador and budget director, arguably the worst job in government. And both of them took too much time away from my family in Ohio, and they were tough. One day I was in the cabinet room, and I looked around the cabinet table and all my colleagues, and I realized every single cabinet member lived in Washington. None of them did what I was doing, which is, Jane and I kept our family back home in Ohio, just as we did in the House and I do now in the Senate. And I was going back and forth every week and trying to do the commute with these jobs. I would get home and spend the whole weekend on my computer or on the phone. So in 2007, I left this commute to go home to Ohio full-time, to be within 3 teenagers. That was an important decision, and to be with Jane. It wasn't a good time to leave. There's never a good time to leave, jobs like that. But I went to George W. Bush, and he responded just as you would expect. Why? Because he's a devoted father. Family comes first. But after being home for a while, I started to get a sense that I needed to come back to this town to help, again, at a time when our country is, I think, in real trouble. I felt the call again. I saw in 2009 the bottom fall out of 2 family businesses I was involved in. I saw people lose their jobs. I saw what it was doing to the economy back home. I saw Washington responding by irresponsibly growing the size and scope of government. I saw the stimulus package. I saw the health care bill. I saw, frankly, spending that was out of control and no real thought about the burden it was putting on our kids and our grandkids. And I felt called to undertake this new challenge and jumped into the race for the United States Senate. Of course, my first stop on deciding to do that was with my family. Jane, who's my partner in all things and an incredible mom, was ready if I was. I asked my kids what they thought, and I'd love being home. those couple years. I was able to coach my daughter's soccer team again. I was able to get involved in their schools, able to even help them on their homework. So we had the family meeting, and my daughter, Sally, then 14 years old, spoke up, and she said, "Dad, you know what? You need to get out of the house a little bit more. You got to do this thing." And with that, I jumped in, and they all pitched in, and I was blessed to be able to win that campaign, and came to Washington a year and a half ago to try to right what was wrong, to serve our country, just as you gathered here today, to answer the call, to help Washington get this country back on track, to help America achieve its promise, and to help Americans achieve their God-given potential. It's a tough time for our country. We're experiencing the weakest economic recovery since the Great Depression. The President gave us a glimpse into the failed philosophy that he has chosen last week when he proclaimed that the private sector was doing just fine. He needs to get out more. But I'll tell you, what concerned me even more was the context within which he made that statement. It wasn't just that the private sector is doing fine at a time when we've got over 20 million Americans who are either out of work or underemployed. It was that he said the answer is what? More government. The private sector is doing fine. We just need to hire more people in government, and that'll get the economy moving again. I don't think most people in Ohio and around the country agree with that. I don't think most economists agree with that. I don't think it'll work. We've seen it. The failed leadership has been displayed over the last 3.5 years. I was on a telephone conversation today, a conference call with reporters from back home, and one of the reporters took me on and said, "Well, the stimulus has worked. How can you say it hasn't worked?" I said, "Wow, $800 billion later?" And by the way, by their own measures, it was to be under 6% unemployment by now. That's not the way to grow an economy. We've got to generate economic growth through the way we've always done it. It's time-honored, and it works. We've pulled more people out of poverty than any system in the history of the world, and that's the capitalist system in helping free enterprise to help people again achieve their God-given potential. We hear about the unemployment number, 8.2%. I would say closer to 11% when you include the fact that fewer people are looking for work. But that doesn't tell the story, does it? It doesn't tell the heartache. It doesn't tell the kind of hardships our families are facing. And it puts a strain on families. And strong families is what's essential to a healthy society. Teaching your children right from wrong is hard enough in today's culture. It's even harder in this economy as parents are stretched thin, struggling to get by. But ultimately, it's through those parents empowered to raise strong children, not through government, that the next generation is going to learn the values that have made this country great. From our Declaration of Independence and from our Creator, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Life, by that I mean innocent life, held sacred from conception until death. But much as I've relied on these values, and you have, and America has over the years, we've also relied on something else as a country, and that's prayer and faith to get through the most arduous of trials. As a nation, turning to God has sustained us in dark hours. It did so during the Revolution when we went up against a foe that was far stronger. We used it in a civil war that tore this country apart and then brought it back together with prayer and faith. 2 world wars, a Great Depression, the attacks on 9/11. We shouldn't stray away from the fact that our Judeo-Christian heritage is part of who we are. And we've turned to it time and time again. Thomas Jefferson, who some would say was the least pious among our founders, understood its importance when he asked, "Can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are a gift of God?" This was Thomas Jefferson. Look on the memorial, it's there, on the mall. In the depths of the Civil War, at a place called Gettysburg, President Abraham Lincoln proclaimed that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom. Lincoln, the great emancipator, perhaps better than anyone before or since, understood the importance of faith in the life of our republic. Again, see it on the walls of his memorial, on the mall. Almost a century later, on June 6, 1944, with D-Day underway, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt chose to share a prayer with the nation rather than a speech on D-Day. As our troops were hitting the beaches in France, and we knew there'd be great losses, and there were thousands lost alive that day. This extraordinary prayer brought strength and inspiration to our country during an incredibly challenging time. My friend Chris Long of the Ohio Christian Alliance back home in Ohio gave me the idea to promote adding this moving prayer to the National World War II Museum on the Mall. In fact, just last week, Joe Lieberman and I introduced legislation to do this, and we read the prayer on the floor of the United States Senate. I talked earlier a little about what a great pleasure that was and what an amazing prayer it is. Thanks to Ralph and to Gary and all of you in the coalition, and Gary has a particular interest in this. He talked to me about earlier today. I think we're going to get this legislation passed. We appreciate your help in this. FDR's words are etched in our history. We hope soon in stone, and we hope that it will serve as a testament to the power of prayer through difficult times. I was in Afghanistan last week to see our amazing soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and they are truly incredible. We're so blessed to have them. We pray for them. We pray for our brave men and women in uniform in Afghanistan, as President Roosevelt prayed on D-Day, when he asked God to lead them straight and true, give strength to their arms, stoutness to their hearts, steadfastness in their faith. By the way, no freedom our troops have fought for over the centuries is more important than the freedom of religion, but this administration has often treated it as a second-class right. Most recently, we, of course, saw this in the right of conscience treated as a mere afterthought or inconvenience in the administration's implementation of the regulations that go as part of the health care bill. As you know, despite deep-felt concerns expressed by religious employers, the Obama administration has refused to back down. They've still got an insurance mandate that needlessly pits health care against the rights of religious liberty. The religious exemption in this rule is so narrow that it covers only charities that decline to serve people of different faiths. Think about that. So this literally means that groups like Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charities wouldn't qualify because they ask people whether they're hungry, whether they need help, whether they're sick, whether they're homeless. They don't ask them whether they're Christians. That's their mission. This administration simply doesn't get it. A conscience protection that asks faith-based groups to abandon their mission of charity is no protection at all. The freedom to live out one's faith is fundamental to who we are as Americans, isn't it? It's part of our core. And with the vigilance and dedication of each person here in this room, we can ensure that that right of conscience, that George Washington called the choicest of our blessings, remains central to the American way of life and a source of inspiration for the world. We're blessed to live in this great country, the United States of America, and our country needs each of you in this room to continue to let your voices be heard by standing for faith and for freedom. Thank you. Godspeed in your work. God bless this great country.
What a leader who has answered the call. We have other great leaders who have answered the call as well, and I'd like to invite to the stage